Young Turks founder and main dude Cenk Uygur is being dragged by the left, actually. This is kind of weird, but well, no, and not really that surprising because Cenk Uygur, in my opinion, isn't really a progressive, and we can go through this. But basically what happens is the dude tweeted that a Democratic president with balls should cut off funding from red states to make them beg for a handout. And I'll say rather unsurprisingly, the people who got mad were progressives. And I think it's because many of the actual progressives understand you can't just say we are going to force poor people to beg for handouts. And you don't win elections by dragging the middle of the country and by dragging poor people. But not only that, there are some people who are dragging Cenk for using the with balls reference because apparently now he's a bigot. Racist, sexist, yeah, all of those things. But I think if you look at the Young Turks history, you can see that this is unsurprising. I mean, the dude tried to bust up a union at his own organization. So let's read what's going on, and we'll read some of these criticisms. But I'll be fair, man. Look, it's progressives who are dragging this guy. He's a fake progressive, if you were to ask me. I'm not saying this to try and dig at Cenk Uygur, man. By all means, do your thing. I just personally don't believe he actually cares about these causes. And again, I'm not saying that as an emotional dig, haha, I got you. No, I think Cenk's a businessman. I think he runs a business. I think he found a way to make money, and he's trying to court this base. And he says things that he thinks will be like red meat for his base. How about we cut off funding for these red states? And he just comes off sounding like he's out of touch and doesn't really understand what people need or want. Let's read the story. The Examiner says, a left-wing media personality said he wished a Democrat was running the country so Republicans would be forced to, quote, beg for their handouts. Young Turks host Cenk Uygur lashed out in a reply to a tweet by President Trump, stating that Republican-run states are miserable failures and that he wished a Democrat were president so U.S. citizens in GOP-controlled states would be forced to beg for economic relief. Here's what he said, quote, if we had a Democrat with balls when we take over, they'd cut off funding to red states and make them beg for their handout. Almost all of them are welfare queens who live off the blue states. Republican-run states are, on average, miserable failures who take more from the federal government. This is not how you win elections. Everybody gets that, except apparently you. But again, like I said, I think Cenk Uygur is just trying to, hey, look, guys, I'm on your side, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. In his original tweet, Trump admonished states who had adopted high taxes and sanctuary cities, suggesting they look within instead of to the federal government to address expanding fiscal issues. Trump has been critical of states such as California, which borrowed $348 million from the federal government on Monday to address spiraling unemployment backlogs. Uygur's family has a history of making controversial statements about elected officials. In August 2019, Uygur's nephew said Texas Rep. Dan Crenshaw, I'm not even gonna read this. He just said really messed up stuff. Yeah, Last year, Uygur ran for Congress in the district of disgraced former Democratic Rep. Katie Hill. He won only 6.6% of the vote, finishing in fourth place out of 12. Now, here's why I want to talk about this. I definitely want to highlight the progressives who are calling him out and show you what people think. Take away the horrifying sentiment, and I got to admit, I honestly don't care if the government were to take away funding from many red states or blue states or whatever. I think it's really a question of what kind of funding. What's the funding for? And that's the thing that Cenk Uygur doesn't bring up. Are these red states? Let me see if I have something here. Yeah, so I have the top 10 donor states. And this image is a little small. Maybe I can zoom in. Here's a picture, a map of the U.S., and you can see the states that receive the most funding versus the states that actually give back. And we can see that, Illinois, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Washington, Colorado, Nebraska, and North Dakota, it appears, are all giving more. Now, some states are giving way more, like New York, it appears, percentage-wise. But the question is, what are the states getting and why are they getting funding? I think what Cenk Uygur is leaving out is that a lot of what these states are probably getting money for would be like defense. In which case, yeah, that makes sense for the federal government to be paying for defense. But of course, there's money for other programs. What Cenk Uygur doesn't include is that there are still many blue states that are taking money from the federal government. The bigger problem here is that Cenk Uygur is racist, sexist, classist, and he's getting dragged for it. So I'll show you this first. Here's a story from just about a month ago. Inside the union campaign that roiled left-wing networks, the Young Turks, Progressive firebrand Cenk Uygur, the CEO, put intense pressure on staffers not to unionize. Surprise, surprise, the dude's not really a progressive. I don't know what his deal is. I've been on a show a couple times, and it seems like in recent history, because of, Trump derangement syndrome and because of the weird tribalism, he's abandoned his principles. And one of the challenges is that Trump's base is populist, meaning there's a decent overlap on key issues between the left-wing populists and the right-wing populists. And because of this, because of Cenk having to oppose everything that is Trump all the time, he ends up actually sounding like an elitist half the time. Because if you're opposing things like, Donald Trump wanting to increase wages for union workers, and he's concerned about unchecked illegal immigration, Cenk Uygur comes out and criticizes that and takes the side of the, I'm doing air quotes, progressives. He comes off looking like an elitist. Bernie Sanders said, I think this was 2015, that open borders was a Koch brothers proposal. The general idea for the longest time from actual progressives was that by opening the borders, these big corporations could bring in low-cost, unskilled labor where they don't have to legally pay for benefits. They don't want to pay for health care. They don't want to pay for paid family leave, childcare, things like that. So they said, I'll tell you what. We open up the border. We bring in these people that can work for us for dirt. We don't got to do anything for them. When that didn't work, they said, how about we send our factories overseas so we get the same benefit? Fine. You can keep your border protections. You can keep your workers' rights. We'll just put the companies, the factories in Mexico and China. Trump opposed that. Initially, Bernie Sanders did too. But for whatever reason, and I think it's because of the orange man bad narrative, people like Cenk Uygur and other progressives all of a sudden started going like, it's time for open borders. And it's like, when did y'all start defending what Bernie Sanders called a right-wing proposal? Now, I'm not going to pretend it's actually right wing. I think it's just a buzzword. But of course, Bernie Sanders flip-flopped as well. And they ended up coming out against the workers. Bernie had to admit, I think it was this year, actually, or maybe just late last year, in a New York Times interview, that yes, unchecked illegal immigration will depress wages for the working class. And he was forced to admit it. It was a position he long held. So what ends up happening is that Trump comes out and actually says things progressives like. But because the media and because the mainstream narrative from the left has always been that everything that Trump does is bad, they had to oppose him. Well, here's the reality. When a union actually comes to Cenk Uygur's workplace, what does he do? He shuts it down because the dude is a businessman. And hey, again, more power to him, like, hey, no beef. Congratulations on running your business. You don't want to have a union? Sure, fine, whatever. I mean, it's illegal in certain respects, but okay, fine, you do your thing. But if this is supposed to be about principle, and they're supposed to be the progressives championing Bernie Sanders and the working class, fighting for workers and all that good democratic socialist stuff, why would he oppose a union? This is the weirdest thing to me. They call me a conservative, and I would never do anything like this. If I had a company where people came and said they want to unionize, I'd be like, do it, buddy. Like, let's figure it out. Let's make it all work. Even Vice. This is another funny thing I brought up. Vice CEO Shane Smith. You'd think of all companies, Vice. Well, Vice has certainly adopted the more feminist stance as of late. But when the Vice news team went to unionize, the CEO Shane was like, more power to you, man. Awesome. Let's get it done. What did Cenk Uygur do? He screamed at somebody. He slammed papers on the ground, and apparently he fired a dude. So look, if you want to do news media like Vice and you're biased, okay, fine. But if you want to claim to be a progressive and you're going to go on your show and you're going to be like, here's all the things we got to do. Here's what I'm fighting for. And then behind the scenes, you're a cutthroat capitalist kicking out the union people. Sorry, man, I'm not going to buy it. So Cenk Uygur, he tweeted this, and I was actually shocked to see. I mean, I take that back. I'm not actually shocked to see it. I think there's a lot of principled leftists. I think there's a lot of progressives. I disagree on policy, but I think there are a decent amount who are principled. And I'm glad to see this because people like Cenk Uygur are the grifters. All right. They want to argue that, I'm a grifter or you're a grifter or whatever, all the stupid stuff. Nah, man. The grifters are the people like Jennifer Rubin. Do you know who she is? She's the conservative blogger at the Washington Post, where she'll tweet something like in 2018 during the Kavanaugh hearing, she said something like, we must, believe all women and give them a chance to be heard. And we must take this very seriously. And then when it came to Biden, she says, the onus is on the accuser. It's like, we get it. You have no principles. You're just saying what needs to be said because you want to get clicks and retweets. So the only way I can really define what makes someone not a grifter is consistency. Do you actually believe what you're saying? Now, I'm not going to sit here and toot my own horn. I certainly think that the accusations against Joe Biden are a waste of time. I don't necessarily believe them, and I don't think it should be used against him for a presidential run. But The only issue I take, and I think many other people who are calling out Biden, including the progressives who pushed the story in the first place, is that these are the rules you asked for. So if the Democrats like Pelosi and Biden and all that said these are the standard by which we operate, then I'll say, hey, man, all right, there you go. Use your standard. Now, a bunch of other progressives, actual Bernie supporters, well, they literally believe in that standard. That's why they broke the story. So the people who broke the story were progressives. They called out Brett Kavanaugh and had this wacky no due process standard. They call out Joe Biden for the exact same thing. And I'm like, hey, man, they're being consistent. Here we can see Cody Johnston responds to Cenk Uygur. Man, what? Again, people who I would probably disagree with, but they're being consistent. Hey, man, that's all I can ask for. I might not get along. We might have fierce debates. We might just yell at each other online all the time. But calling out the grifters and the liars, I respect, I appreciate. Of course, they'll accuse me of the same thing, which I don't think is fair. Somebody responded, and we can see it's a Democratic socialist with a little rose in their name. Well, his is a capitalist, so honestly, not surprised. Just help all workers instead. So this person says, yeah, that would rock Democrats' rule. He's so good at reminding folks that he's a capitalist. I love how he's getting dragged by socialists. What a horrifically racist and classist take. You're garbage. Not to mention sexist. If he wants to play that game, then one could argue that it's because everyone before had balls that were in the position. This person says some people fantasize about killing their neighbors and making their skins into coats. That doesn't make it good or sane. Well, that's a little bit much. I don't think Cenk Uygur is saying that. Look, I got to be honest, man. Why are we giving federal funding to any states? Seriously. I mean, look, I do find it interesting that there are many red states that receive a lot in funding from the federal government. Now, of course, like I said, one thing you got to consider is that some of this is probably defense. You know, the federal government providing for the common defense. That's actually what they're supposed to do. So, yes, blue states are going to pay. The funniest thing about this tweet from Cenk Uygur is he's making a conservative argument. Think about it. Why should we have to pay for them? They're welfare queens. Is that a joke, Cenk Uygur? You think the Democrats should take the conservative stance of getting rid of the progressive tax system? That's basically what you're saying, right? Think about it. New York is very wealthy, so they pay a premium on top of all the money they make to the federal government, and the federal government uses that to subsidize the poorer states. What does that sound like? So I actually have no problem with how that system works. I've actually talked in great deal about the idea, say like using New York City as an example, the Upper West Side of Manhattan, very wealthy. They pay a lot in taxes. That money should be used for fixing the streets and the infrastructure and the hospitals and the schools of poorer areas because there's excess, because there's wealth. But you don't even necessarily need a progressive tax to get that done. If somebody's got $1 million and they pay 10%, you take $100,000, right? If someone's got $100, you take 10%, you take $10. So you can clearly, you don't have to change the percentage to do it. I'm still in favor of a progressive tax, however. So Cenk Uygur is actually taking this weird, I don't know. It's like he's trying to make the right angry by insulting them, but insulting the left by making a point about how taxes work that the left literally does not agree with. What did he think was going to happen? I think what we're seeing here is grifter breakdown. You know, I really do hate using the word grifter. I'll just put it this way. Cenk is a businessman. He's trying to pander to his base, but this doesn't work. You can't just be anti the other guy because some people do believe in a system. There are a lot of progressives, good people I respect and appreciate, that believe in universal health care, UBI, and other things. I disagree. I don't think these things are possible. All right, I'm fairly moderate. I do like the idea, as of right now, of like a public option in healthcare, and I'd love to get to the point where we could make universal healthcare. I don't know if we can. I don't know if it's sustainable in even other countries. So it's an issue of, can we work out the kinks? And UBI as well. I think at the core, universal basic income sounds fantastic. Is it possible? I honestly don't think so. So we can have a conversation in good faith about how we make a system work and what's the best compromise. But what Cenk is doing is just trying to be like, look at me, everybody. I'm just like you. Haha, I'm going to say something about those nasty Republicans. Hoo-hoo. And then people are like, bro, nah, this ain't it. So let's see what else. And now I want to show you some maps, actually. Someone said, man, I think this tweet is really going to jank your reputation in the eyes of socialists. To be fair, I don't think he had a good reputation, especially after the union busting that happened at the Young Turks. Joey Salad says, I'm only here for the ratio. And then someone posted that silly photo of Joey. Emma Vigilant says, punish the state's Republican leaders by publicly shaming them. Don't cut off funds to poor people in red states who need government assistance. Their social safety net is already threadbare as it is. And even strategically, This would be weaponized mercilessly by the right. Joey Salad says unionize before he fires you. So let me show you this right here. Let me show you why Cenk Uygur is a racist. Well, no. I'll take that back. I'm just kind of exaggerating. I think he doesn't know what he's talking about, and he's just trying to wave a flag for the progressives to convince them he's just like them. And this is a website called 270 to Win. You can see the electoral map of 2016. Look at all these red states down here. What's up with this? How come all these southern states are red? At the same time, how come these southern states have the highest concentration of the black community? I don't know what that means. You can argue that their votes are suppressed. You can argue that it means they're being, suppressed by slightly majority white voters. I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think many of these people are actually fairly conservative on many, many issues. And thus you end up with red states in the South. Maybe Cenk Uygur doesn't realize this, but he's talking about taking money away from poor states, not poor white people. It's like you're literally targeting vulnerable people because you don't want to pay. That's like as capitalist, as they come. It's such a conservative argument. I know it's not really a conservative argument because I don't think conservatives are talking about necessarily, defunding states. Actually, no, maybe they are. I don't know. I have to actually talk to someone. Maybe you guys know better. But like thinking about it in terms of taxes, thinking about it in terms of should I pay for the health care of someone who doesn't have money, right? It's kind of the argument he's making. Make them beg for their handouts also is super elitist, kind of gross. But of course, as we know, Cenk Uygur is a union buster. Politico reported production and post-production crews at the left-wing news network The Young Turks voted Thursday night to unionize with the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, capping a surprisingly brutal campaign marked by intense opposition from founder and CEO Cenk Uygur, a popular voice on the left. Man, how much is too much, I would ask you, Mr. Uygur? I'm sorry, I'm not trying to mispronounce your name. This is a question often asked by many leftists. How much is enough? How much is too much? I honestly think there is having enough. I really do. Now, I'm not saying I think people should stop working and stop earning. But man, I'll tell you what, when it comes to wealth and resources, I think at a certain point, it's like, what do you do with it all? Now, I think a lot of people on the left misunderstand how economics works. And they simply think that like taxing the money of people will somehow grant you access to something. It doesn't make sense. What money is essentially like power, access, and freedom. It gives you the ability to make decisions and to command the managerial power, right? So the amount of money in the money supply isn't necessarily the most important thing. It does have a major effect. So we're printing money like crazy. It's a really, really bad thing. If we just took all the money from the billionaires, all you do is take their power away. It won't increase necessarily, it won't change the inherent value of an individual's labor. It won't increase access for the average person to another person's labor. That's determined by you doing trade with them, right? But this is why I tend to lean left on a lot of issues. I do think it's dangerous to have oligarchs, ultra billionaires that control speech and stuff like that. Zuckerbergs and Dorseys. And I think Jack Dorsey is more of an all right guy. He's giving a lot of his money away. But when you have these ultra wealthy oligarchs, people like Michael Bloomberg, I think that's a very, very serious problem because they can use their disproportionate power to heavily influence things. So this, for me, it comes down to how do we make sure that we have a more, I don't want to say necessarily completely equal society, but look, man, I lean left. I think there's got to be some kind of restrictions, some kind of capacity. Otherwise, you end up with a San Francisco. And I think nobody really wants the country to be like that. But we may be headed that direction. San Francisco is a place where you've got ultra wealthy billionaires in their, fancy lofts, their major companies. And then you've got people taking dumps all over the street. You get people like Nancy Pelosi, your representative, who's supposed to be fighting for you. She's worth, collective with her husband, like $200 million or whatever. And what is she really doing for the people of her district? I get it. She represents them to the federal government. So she has a role in more federal decision making. But do you really want to live like San Francisco? No, I don't know what the solution is. I don't necessarily think it's, taxing everybody, but I think there's a question about how much is too much. And that's why I look back at what Cenk Uygur has done with, talking about taking money from getting a Democrat to come in and cut funding. Why? Well, why would you do that? Maybe we should cut funding to the blue states who apparently, don't need it, and we should still tax them or something like that. That's the more progressive argument, right? But when it comes to the union busting, my question is, why? What are you worried about? What do you think you're doing? Do you think you're going to be CNN? No, I really don't think so. I get it, man. You want to keep growing. You want to make money. But how much is enough for you, dude? The dude is already a multimillionaire and he's stressing over people who want to unionize. That to me makes no sense. I get it, man. Unions can cause problems in certain respects. I'm not a big fan of, admittedly, being in unions. And I've talked about this a lot. I love collective bargaining. I love the idea that people will stand up and make demands and say together we have a stronger voice and all that stuff. I don't like the weird laws and rules that restrict what unions can do and how they operate. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. But I'll tell you what, if I don't get it. I just really don't. I don't understand that perspective of someone like Cenk Uygur, who's going to have a very successful, very well-off company, taking in a bunch of investor money, making millions of dollars. Someone from Young Turks told me how much money they make, and they make a lot of money. And they're making, well, I don't know for sure, so I'm not going to say any hard numbers. I know they have a lot of people to pay. And I guess the concern is, will they be able to pay everybody if they have to increase wages or whatever? And it's like, what's the worst that's going to happen? Do you think you're going to go to business? Like, bro, you're super rich. Your company is successful. What are you freaking out about? Well, I think it really comes down to this. The dude wants for himself, not for anyone else. He doesn't actually care about these causes, doesn't care about these principles or values. And that's what it's really all about. And so, you know what? Maybe it's a good thing he lost his congressional race. He was called out for all of these things. He was called out for union busting. Yeah, this guy is a fake progressive. I really don't think he cares about anything he's saying. And that's just me. But of course, you can see he's getting annihilated by actual progressives because this dude does this weird thing. The Young Turks does this weird thing where they try and prop up the establishment while arguing they're for the progressives. Yeah, they're trying to cast a wide net over the left, probably for viewership, for ratings, for subscribers. It ain't going to work, man. Your base is fractured. You can either choose to pony up to the establishments like Joe Biden, which he apparently isn't doing, but then you're going to make everybody on the progressive side mad when you say these stupid red meat things where I'm like, let's take money away from the poor people. Yeah, nah, sorry. Doesn't work that way. Try having principles. Maybe that'll actually work out for you. I'll leave it there. Thanks for hanging out. Stick around. The next segment is coming up on this channel at 1 p.m., and I will see you all then.